Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority.
7:07. This is the Morning Majority. Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine Ham. You know, I spend a fair amount of my spare time down in the state of Florida. I've gotten to know a lot of politicians down there and some of the officials in the state. One of the guys that I turn to on a regular basis when I want to try to understand what's happening in the state of Florida is a man who will become soon the Speaker of the Florida House. His name is Will Rutherford, a representative from this great state of Florida, state legislature, and he's on the phone with us now. Will, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show.
Listen, in all fairness, we want to say up front, you are supporting Mitt Romney, correct?
Correct.
And you felt he did pretty well last night?
You know, I thought it was a great closing argument for him in the campaign. He came into this out of South Carolina with not nearly the momentum Newt had, but he had the organization on the ground. He has slowly picked up momentum, but I thought last night he was able to put it together.
All right, here's what I want to know. A couple things. Number one, we look at the debate here in Washington, D.C. when we see it, and certain things resonate with us. But what is resonating with the people of Florida? What are the issues that you hear discussed in that debate that you say, I know that's going to sell well with certain voters in the state of Florida?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. The one is that seems to be hitting home with everybody is electability. There's a concern that if we don't put someone up against Barack Obama who can go toe-to-toe with him and can also win, then we're just spinning our wheels. And if electability is something that people seem to care about, and we hear that a lot in Florida, that is, he has proven, I think, over the last week, and really last night I thought, that he is the most electable candidate.
What about immigration, Will?
Yeah, immigration, it's interesting. I think people have misinterpreted what Governor Romney has stated on immigration. Certainly we have a very large Hispanic population. You cannot win Florida without getting the Hispanic vote. The Hispanic vote in Florida is different than most parts of the country. You know, we have a very large Cuban-American population in South Florida. That's a Republican base, and they will turn out and they will vote. They don't have a problem with Governor Romney's position on immigration. In fact, I think if you ask most of them, they support it. Just about the entire elected body of the city of Miami-Dade County has endorsed Governor Romney, and they're supportive of his positions. They want the rule of law to be upheld as well. And so his idea of enforcing the law is frankly in line with what most legal Hispanics in Florida believe as well.
Let me fast forward a few months from now, whether or not it's Mitt Romney or if it's Newt Gingrich or somebody else who's representing the Republicans in the general election. Where do you see Florida going? I know the housing industry has been just severely damaged down there. Florida went for Barack Obama in 2008. Is it going to swing the other way around this time? And if so, why do you think that?
Well, I think it's going to be close. Florida is a purple state, as we all know. It's been affected by this economic downturn probably as much or more than any other state in the country. But I think people are frustrated. I think the hope and change that President Obama promised, the hope and change that he made his taglines for his campaign have not resonated, have not turned into reality, frankly. And I think people are looking for leaders. That's why moments of sincerity, moments of telling the people what they need to hear and not what they want to hear, people seem to gravitate to that more so than I've ever seen in a political environment, and that's because they know the country's future is at stake. President Obama gave a 2-hour speech the other night in the State of the Union, never mentioned the fact that we have a $15 trillion deficit that's spiraling out of control. Floridians know that, and with our elderly population, sure, they care about their health benefits, they care about their Social Security benefits, but more than all that, they care about their grandkids. And they care about the future of this country, and they feel like Barack Obama has been ignoring it.
As we know, Florida's a huge state, different populations in different places, different leanings in different places. Where are the candidates going to be concentrating in the closing days? Which one are certain ones making arguments in certain places because they're more likely to pick up votes there? As some have suggested, Santorum would be in the Panhandle more often.
It's a very good question, Mary Catherine. I think you'll see it is so diverse. You know, you go into South Florida, Miami-Dade County, and it's over 60% Hispanic. You go into the Panhandle, and the type of voter you're talking to there is more similar to one in Alabama or Georgia. You go into the I-4 corridor, and that's really key. I think if you were going to say which candidates will spend time where, that's kind of hard to predict, but 50% of all the Republicans in the state of Florida live within the I-4 corridor. And so really when you talk about a primary or a general election, that's where your sweet spot is. If you can't do well in the I-4 corridor, you're not going to do well in an election. So I think all the candidates will spend a lot of time there. That's where the soccer moms are. That's where the average voter is of middle income that is going to show up on primary day. But also, they're going to fight for that Hispanic vote because it is a vote that tends to go in block, and particularly the Cuban-American community, they seem to vote in a pretty cohesive manner. And so those are the two. If I had to say there's two spots, I'd say South Florida and I-4.
All right, let me ask you about the voting, because it's already underway in the state of Florida, right?
Voting has started. In fact, voting started close to... Put it this way, by the time the Iowa caucuses got together, there had been more Floridians voting absentee than showed up at the caucuses.
Wow. Yes, I know that's impressive. But what I'm suggesting here is that the votes that are taking place now is voting that would sort of be, one would assume, representative of where the polls are in the state of Florida at the given moment. So in past days, Newt Gingrich has been doing very well in the polls. So one assumes that the absentee balloting at that time would be, or the early balloting would be in favor of Gingrich. I guess what I'm trying to say is we often think of, well, where are the polls on Election Day? But in Florida, it matters where the polls have been all along.
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually, nowadays, early voting and absentee voting are kind of two different things. We open our polls about 10 days to 2 weeks before Election Day, and so you can actually show up at the polls and vote early. We also open up our absentee ballots about 5 to 6 weeks before Election Day. Almost 35 to 40% of our voters vote before Election Day. So it's a totally different game in Florida than most other states. What's interesting about that, though, Brian, is that when they first send out that absentee ballot, almost 50% of absentee ballot members vote within that first 48-hour period. And so you're talking about December. So actually half of those absentee ballots that are going to be filled out and sent in were filled out before January 1st. The only person who was on the air, the only person who was campaigning, and the only person who had an organization on the ground back in December was, guess who? Governor Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. None of the other candidates were here. And so I think that a large majority of the early votes that have been cast will be for Mitt Romney. And that short surge that Newt had was during a period that is not heavily trafficked. It's really leading up to Election Day and those first couple of days of early voting.
Can you clear up something for us that's been somewhat confusing, and maybe we're just the only ones who are confused, but is it winner take all in Florida, or is it proportionate, the delegates?
It is winner take all. There's apparently former chairman of the party, Michael Steele, has confused people, saying that it's not a winner-take-all, but our chairman of the party has negotiated with the Republican Party, and we have an agreement that it is a winner-take-all state. So I think whether or not there's going to be some questions or some lawyers trying to dispute that fact.
There may be a challenge to that down the road.
There may be a challenge, but I feel very confident. Our chairman, I was with him last night, sat next to him at the debate, feels very confident that it's going to be winner-take-all, and I think that, along with the fact that we've moved our date up, really makes Florida, I think, the staple state in this debate, and we want it to be. I mean, when you talk about the country, Iowa and New Hampshire are great states, and I love them, and South Carolina is a great place to visit, but Florida really is a microcosm of the country, and I think whoever wins on Tuesday is going to have a tremendous advantage going forward.
Will Weatherford, who's Speaker-designate and the state house rep there in Florida, thank you for joining us. I'm headed down that way, so maybe our paths will cross when I'm down there.
I hope so. Give me a call, Brian.
All right.